got a story?
Then you can take multiple clips, just hold it down for as long as you want.
Does it stop it at 15 minutes? 50 seconds?
No, like if you can do as many clips as you want, and 30 seconds is the.
It's 5 o'clock. It's now time for the #1 show on the radio. I'll bring you Brandon J. Lawrence. What's up, man?
Hey, what's going on, Jay Hass? How y'all doing, Louisville? What's going on? You know what time it is. It's your time. It's my time. It's our time. Let's talk it over. We've got a great show for you today. We've got a packed house in here, and it's good weather outside. It's not too hot, not too cold. They're getting ready for their concert over there at St. Stephen with the Barcades and Tony. But it's really only like Tony, right? This is not Raphael. No, I'm just playing. Tony's over there in the SOS band. That's what I want to hear. The SOS. So check that out if you want to. But we had a busy week. This week. It was a heavily anticipated week, and I know we've been saying this lately. It's another trial of the summer. It's the latest trial of the summer. We had a couple. I guess the week before was the Barbara Shanklin trial, which was you know it was a lot of entertainment value in that one. But this one right here was it was one in the making. I guess 2 years in the making. This is an official trial of the summer. It's a criminal trial, and we all know it was the young kid, Josh Young, who was a juvenile that they charged as an adult in a murder case back from May 2011. It was we'll get into some details because we've got a great guest today who's going to go into some details about it because she covered it pretty much from beginning to end, and we were, watching with bated breath what would happen with the verdict, and there was a lot of intrigue and a lot of antics in the trial, a lot of gamesmanship between the prosecutors and the defense attorneys, and this was one, I said this about that old Louisville trial over there with the I guess the sexcapade trial earlier this year. It was well tried on both sides. Aaron White for the prosecution, Elizabeth Jones Brown for the prosecution. They worked very hard, extremely hard, and did their best. And on this one, Pete Schuler and Leslie Smith from the Public Defender's Office, they did a great job also, and they came out. Well, the facts, looks like the facts came out on their side, and, he was, Josh Young was found not guilty of both the murder and the tampering with physical evidence charges, and he's free to go home to his foster family. I don't know how long, because he's almost about to be an adult, so I guess maybe he'll be there for a little while and then move on. But like I said, man, this thing, people were heavily anticipating it. There was a lot of intrigue, and today we've got a great guest a great guest with us. We're going to get to her. We're going to take a break first, though. We'll take a break, come back, introduce our guest, and get into this thing, and try to get some insight, perhaps, that you did not see on the day-to-day, which you couldn't see. Probably the jurors might have gotten a little bit more insight, but we'll try to get some insight that we didn't see and squeeze our special guest for some information, some inside stuff, if she can give it to us. We'll be right back. Let's talk it over.
Well, Mom, I went to Faneuil High School.
What happened?
I was in Y-Pass.
Y-Pass. Oh, that
Youth performing market right now.
Hey, how y'all doing?
My voice sounds
Check this
terrible
out.
because
What we got for
I
you.
napped
We
for
got
an hour and a
expanded
half.
noon time slot from 5 to 6. Let's talk it over for your listening pleasure. 6 every Saturday. Join me, Brandon Lawrence, for Let's Talk It Over. It's your time, it's my time, it's our time. Let's talk it over. Because sometimes
Don't fall asleep,
less
man.
is more.
Polo.
Yes, sir. Here we go in 3, 2.
we're back, y'all. So let's talk it over. We've got, like I said before, we got a special guest, and it's one of Louisville's own, a hometown product, and she's a great reporter for WDRB. It's Paige Quiggins, the one and only. And she was with this, like I said, she was with this trial actually with the case from the beginning to the conclusion, which was the trial yesterday, with the verdict yesterday. So we're gonna get her thoughts on, I guess, the whole case, the trial, and everything like that. But Paige, thanks for being with us first of all.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And what? Okay, we're talking about this Josh Young thing, right? He was a juvenile that was charged as an adult, and so it's some serious stuff. But it all well, I guess we'll go back. Just the background. This was a murder case. Trey Zwicker was killed, and his body was found in the back of Liberty High School back in May 2011, right?
Yes.
And but was that? Did they? I can't remember. Did they find? Did the facts kind of flow right away, or was it did they have to look or what? An investigation?
As far as the facts were concerned, the prosecution said it best that Josh Gauker, who is Young's father, led police down a rabbit hole in the beginning to try to deflect attention away from him. Basically, Trey Zwicker was found by students that were touring the Liberty High School campus. They alerted their teacher, she called police, and then from the time that he was there, he was trying to deflect their attention, and he was trying to draw attention to some kids in the community. They were calling them the Bridgewood kids, I want to say, trying to blame them initially, just trying to do anything but keep the spotlight on himself. And then he eventually told them that his son was responsible, and then obviously now we know, since he was sentenced last week, he's now saying that he acted alone in the murder. It was it's been very convoluted, and details and testimony have changed over time, and a lot of the witnesses were saying that's because Josh Gauker was intimidating them to change their story.
Yeah, you know, you said right. I mean, you hit it on the head. The guy, what's this guy's name? Gauker, Josh Gauker, who's Josh Young's dad.
Yeah,
right. He originally blamed it all on Josh Young.
That is correct.
Okay. Then somehow, some way, he said he admitted and took responsibility for the murder, and then said Josh had nothing to do with it. But that was, and then he actually, you know, he had his own trial, and he was convicted of murder. Talking about Josh Gauker. Josh Gauker was convicted of murder. He got life without the possibility of parole for 20 years.
That's correct.
And in his trial, he basically said that well, I don't know. Did he say he acted alone in his own trial?
He did say he acted alone in his own trial. It was quite a topic of discussion when he took the stand during his son's trial. His argument was that, okay, he was 15 at the time of the murder, Joshua Young was. So his father says, I wanted to pin this on him because I thought he would receive a lesser sentence. I thought that because he was 15 years old when this happened, he would be tried as a juvenile, he would receive lesser punishment, and that way, you know, it's all good for all of us. I get let off the hook, my son gets a lesser sentence, but it didn't pan out that way. So after there were motions made to have him not tried as an adult, etc., and, you know, the prosecution and the judge said, no, you're going to be tried as an adult. There's enough evidence to suggest that there were more than one person involved in this crime, so we're going to pursue this. And that's when he came forward and said, okay, I acted alone, I did this, I told him to lie for me, and, you know, everyone was describing him as a liar and a manipulator, and he even called himself a liar in the courtroom. So
yeah, and he actually fled. They fled the state before. Well, they caught them out of state, right?
Alabama.
Alabama,
Yeah.
And they had taken Gauker had taken a hostage.
Yes.
Taken the car. So this is like this is some straight out of the movie type of stuff.
That's what I was thinking, kind of like a movie plot. And actually, that woman who was a defense witness testified early in the Joshua Young trial because she had to take a bus like 14 hours up here. But apparently, Gowker, held a gun to her head and, told her to drive the car. And they stayed in a hotel room or a motel room together. Excuse me. And apparently, it was discussed. Supposedly, they had smoked weed together, and she was like trying to, I guess, calm him down by talking him out of this. And she said that he never hurt her, but I think that she was a very strong witness in the Joshua Young case because she made it seem like he wasn't involved. Whereas the people who changed their stories, the relatives who were saying he confessed to me that he did this, they were the ones that changed their story. And obviously this woman had no vested interest. Or any kind of relationship to this family, and she was the one saying, he didn't seem like he really wanted to be there. He appeared scared that this was going on, because if I were 15 years old, I'd probably be scared if someone was kidnapping someone and stealing their car. I can't imagine. But the prosecution said, or the defense said, excuse me, that he grew up with a hard life, so I'm not sure what he had seen in his lifetime, but I'm sure that could be startling for anyone to undergo an experience like that.
Sure. And Paige, there was really no physical evidence in this trial, was it?
No, there really was not. There was a few things collected from the crime scene. I believe there was a cigar wrapper, a water bottle, just a few bits and pieces, but really no solid evidence because the murder weapon could not be determined. When Joshua Young supposedly confessed to his relatives, Cassie Gowker, which was a first cousin by marriage and neighbor and sometimes lover of Josh Gowker, Big Josh. Yeah, it very complicated. Apparently, she said that Joshua Young came to her with a bloodstained bat with clothes and said, "Help me get rid of this." She drove him to a location. I want to say it was in Mount Washington, and they put it in a dumpster. That was never recovered. And then Josh Gowker says, "Oh, I used a metal pipe. I rinsed it off in the creek, and that's how I did it." But the medical examiner, Dr. Beckham said that she could not determine what killed him. If they put up some pretty graphic photographs of him, of Trey Zwicker, deceased,
Right.
and I don't see how somebody could have determined that because he was so badly beaten. It was a rod-like object, but there was no way to tell how many people did it or what exactly was used. So, the defense was saying all along, he's innocent. There is no evidence in this case, and that's why they made a motion to redirect a verdict, saying that there wasn't going to be enough evidence presented to the jury to come back with a verdict because there was no evidence. But that motion was denied, and the prosecutors argued, that's for the jury to decide if there's enough evidence or not.
And that's kind of the motion. They showed it on television, and you've covered cases like this before, and you're familiar with criminal cases. The motion for directed verdict is done every time, and that's done as very not common. It's very common, and it's done so there will be it's done for appeal purposes and to protect the defense attorneys. But were you I guess my question would be, are you surprised? I was kind of surprised that they didn't, that Judge Barry Willett, who this case was tried in front of, did not take a more in-depth look at the motion for directed verdict. Because the standard of the motion for directed verdict for you guys out there is you look at all the evidence in the light most favorable to the Commonwealth. And even in the light most favorable to the Commonwealth in this situation, from what they had, from the evidence that was presented by the Commonwealth in the case that they put on, it didn't look like they had anything. It just had, really isn't a bunch of hearsay. He say, she say. And like you said, all these people have intertwined relationships, mothers, brothers, second cousins, and what other kind of family relationships they have. But it was good TV and good for the gossip columns or whatever. But factually, it didn't look like they had anything. And Barry Willett it looks like very well, to my opinion, he could have said, he could have granted that motion for directed verdict. I don't, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, he that's up to him, and that's at his discretion whether he wanted to grant that. But the prosecutors were arguing that obviously it's up to the jury to say Cassie Gowker is a liar or Cassie Gowker is unreliable. She's like, credibility of the witnesses is determined by the jury. Yes,
Right.
her story has changed, but that is evidence. And maybe he said, she said, but it is witness testimony, and they're supposed to take in all that testimony and make an informed decision, come back with a verdict, because obviously they're the ones that are going to pass judgment on this. They're the ones who are going to assess these people's credibility. And yes, I do believe there was a lack of physical evidence, but when it was a rod-like object that was determined, I think, because he argued with the defense attorney, he was like, well, you and I disagree on
You talking about Judge Willett?
Yes, he
Okay.
did. When he made that motion, he was like, you and I disagree on the medical examiner's testimony. She said, with certainty, I cannot rule out that it was a bat, because Pete Schuler was saying, oh, it's not a bat that was in this case. That I think he may have interpreted it a little differently, but Judge Willett was like, no, this is what she said, and I watched the tape, and that was what she said. She said she couldn't rule out a bat, and he was saying, well, even Dr. Nichols, who you put so much faith in his testimony, or excuse me, he said stock in his testimony, he said that there couldn't have been, that there could have been two assailants, but he also prefaced that with, they would have to be standing in the same position or something of that nature. But I mean, as far as the physical evidence is concerned, there really wasn't much as far as as far as Joshua Young was concerned, and it's sad. I've heard many people say we're never really going to know what the truth was, because the truth, unfortunately, died with Trey Zwicker, and someone has been punished for this crime, but his family still say that they're devastated after this verdict was returned.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it looks like it's kind of, in this situation, it looks to be a lot of losers in this situation. Back and get a little bit more inside information with Paige, and I want to ask you on the other side what it's like to deal with a high-profile trial, to cover it, and also competing with national media. Do you have any? Is it competing with them for information and trying to get it first? Just a little bit of insight if you could give it to us. But we'll be right back after these messages and come back with more Paige Quiggins. Let's talk it over. Yeah, okay.
All right, big. 3, 2, 1.
And we're back. Let's talk it over. We're talking about this Josh Young trial, high-profile trial, man, and a lot of people are very interested in it. And we've got WDRB's own Paige Quiggins here to talk about the trial and the coverage and her experience doing it. And we were talking a little bit off the air, but we're talking a little bit. I got sidetracked. Somebody just tweeted me, but we were talking a little bit off the air how it is to cover a nationally covered televised trial, because on the during the weeks leading up to the actual verdict, the national news was covering it, CNN, HLN, and you said Paige was telling us that they were there, and I was just asking her about how it was dealing with them and going through, I guess, going through the dynamics of a high-profile trial. Did you ever? What was Did you ever think that? How do I put it? Was it a situation where you thought that it was it didn't merit the publicity that it got?
As far as it not meriting the publicity it's got, I think this happens all over the country. A lot of high-profile cases, they're chosen at random, but I mean, as far as this one's concerned, I think it had a lot to do with the fact that he was a child. He was being tried as an adult. His father had been convicted and sentenced to the crime, and there was just a lot of bizarre family antics that sort of played into this. And, you know, when a 14-year-old child is beaten to death, I think that speaks enough volumes. I mean, because that is very personal. I mean, it's obviously the family's heartbroken, and I mean, I hate to say it, but shootings and things of that nature, or even stabbings, are a lot more common than someone being beaten to death. A kid, a 14-year-old kid who had not even gotten to start his life. You know, I mean, I think that's a lot of the reason why. And then, of course, his stepbrother is accused of beating him, and his stepfather is accused, well, is now sentenced, but, you know, was accused of beating him to death. I think that had a lot to do with it.
And yeah, and I guess the family dynamic, brothers, I guess you kind of think, I guess the obvious thing, even though it's not really a parallel, kind of Cain and Abel, especially since Josh Galker put the biblical reference in it that the reason he killed Josh Young was because his mom, Josh Young's mom, had aborted some of his children. So he
That's
made a
right,
reference to the Old Testament. I don't know. I haven't read the Old Testament in a little while, but I didn't know exactly what he was talking about. It might be in there. Who knows? But yeah, it was crazy. And I guess to me one of the highlights was I don't know if would you say charisma of Josh Galker, or the character. What a character
he's
he
a
turned out
character.
to be.
Yeah. There's no question there. He is a character. I mean, I really do feel like he was loving his place in the spotlight as far as the coverage was concerned, because he was even saying when he took the stand, "Oh, media all over the country are covering this," you know. And then, of course, he wanted to make a point that, "Oh, I'm wanted in every state. Just call the police. Just call the local PD." You know, I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, he I guess liked the attention. I mean, in my opinion, for what it's worth, that would be negative attention. But if that's all the attention that you've ever gotten, then maybe in some people's minds it's better than no attention at all. But I mean, his testimony was very bizarre, and it was very hard to use on air for anyone because every other word that came out of his mouth was an expletive.
Did Barry Willett ever admonish him for the language that he was using, or he just kind of let him talk?
I think, honestly, Judge Willett was so frustrated with him after his trial that I guess he expected that, and the prosecution, you know, wanted to introduce him as a key witness, but, you know, he looked him in the eyes and said, "I hope you spend your entire life in the prison system. I hope I never lay eyes on you again. I don't understand how you can sit here with a smirk on your face after all the pain that you've caused these families." And I mean, he really was. Like, he was sitting there with a smirk on his face when he was getting sentenced. And it's just kind of like, it's unbelievable to think that someone can cause that amount, inflict that much pain on so many people, not to mention the kid that died, and just sit there with the expression that he was wearing. And I mean, when he took the stand in his son's murder trial, it's like he was just laughing, and, you know, it was bizarre behavior, but then he was sitting there saying, "Okay, well, you know, I don't even know why I'm effing here, because I've already effing told you all the whole effing story," you know, just like I said, every other word out of his mouth was an expletive, and he was just almost seemed agitated. He was like, "Well, I told you all what happened last week. I've been sentenced for the crime to life in prison." But every time he said that, he was like, "I've lied this whole effing time." But he's like, "Except for when I got arraigned." He kept saying, "Except for when I got arraigned," you know, to make sure that everyone knows that he was telling the truth at the end when he said that he did it alone.
Right.
So
Wow.
he did make that quite clear.
And I guess doing this trial and doing the whole ordeal, do you ever develop? I know, because you're a professional, and we're watching on television, you know, as lay people, and it's kind of like a television show, you know, and you've got characters, and you develop a like and dislike for him. Do you ever develop a like or dislike for anyone in the story, or do you kind of remove yourself from that and just strictly go with the facts and say that's it?
I try to remove myself completely and judge. My feelings are unimportant to our viewers. You know,
Okay.
it's not about what I think. It's
Sure.
about what I can report, what I can say, and it's up to you to make the judgment call. I do find myself, however, sometimes feeling sorry for, you know, I don't know how as a human being you couldn't feel sorry for Trace Wicker's family as far as this was concerned. I feel sorry for all families involved because they're all affected by this. I mean, you know, especially the victim's family, because, you know, no 14-year-old should have to go through something like that. And God bless his poor little sister, who obviously is, they were very close. Trace Wicker's little sister, I believe her name was Mackenzie. You know, she took the stand. She wasn't up there very long. They were just asking her what she remembered, and she really didn't have much to say. And, you know, it's just heartbreaking to have to hear, you know, a 5th grader take the stand and be asked to recall things like that. You know, I mean, I don't understand how as a human being you couldn't feel sympathy or compassion for, you know, for what happened to this young man, as well as, you know, both families involved, because it's a lose-lose. I mean, even though Joshua Young, you know, was acquitted, he was found not guilty, he still had to, whether he was truly guilty or not guilty, we will never know, like I've said, because that story died with Trace Wicker, unfortunately. No one will ever know the entire truth, for certain, but he's still spent 2 years of his life in the juvenile detention center.
Yeah, that's the weird part about it. He spent two years of his life in the juvenile facility. I don't know what his bond was, because he was charged as an adult, so he had to have a bond. I guess they couldn't make the bond, and that's why he spent so much time waiting for his trial. But yeah, and he's found not guilty. That's kind of weird.
Well, it just seems, you know, I mean, I can only imagine what he's thinking. Well, 2 years of my life, but I think really he was just relieved that it was over, to be completely honest with you. I mean, obviously, I'm sure anyone would say, oh my gosh, you know, especially if he was not guilty. I don't know, you don't know, none of us know if he was or he wasn't, but, you know, his defense attorneys seemed to believe that he was a good kid, and he just, you know, had a hard life. I know that, I believe it was Easter morning in April of 2010, his mother died of a drug overdose. You know, Dad's been locked up for goodness knows how long, and he was out for 2 months before all this happened. And I mean, this kid had been living with a foster family, and all they kept saying was, this kid's had a hard life. Wow. And so now he's finally going to, I guess, enjoy the rest of his youth until he turns 18 in January.
Wow, that's a quick turnaround to deal with all that, and boom, you're an adult, you're on your own. Do we have a call?
Yes, we do.
I think we've got a call. Hello, call.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. Now, you guys are doing a real good job expounding on this recent trial. I got to say that I have to agree 100% with Miss Paige, due to the fact that I believe Josh Gallagher felt that he could pin it on his son Josh Young due to the fact that he was a minor, and when the script it flip-flop on him, you know, he said, you know, he found out that they were going to try him as an adult, and they weren't going to let him ease through the cracks. You know, that had a big part in it. But also, let me say this, that you know, most verdicts, when I hear the verdict, I usually sort of say, wow. But I think that this was the correct verdict, in the fact that the forensic expert, as I said last week, said it was the injuries were inflicted by one person using one weapon, standing in one place. You know, so Mr. Gallagher, yeah, you know, he was a character. He was a character that had no fear of what the system could do to him. As a matter of fact, he acted like he had certain immunities. You know, this is what was so captivating about the case, was Mr. Gallagher coming in, you know, not caring, what we would call disrespecting the courts, maybe to some, and to others it would call, he just was standing up against the court system. But the fact of the matter is that since Mr. Gowker had said that he had done this, well, and as Miss Paige said, here's Josh Young, he's living in this situation, and which I thought he handled himself very well to be a young man for all of these years, for the years that he was incarcerated. Now he can go home with his life, because I just don't see where